I have Tim Trotter here, CEO of DBA, to talk about the dairy processor grants. Thanks for joining me here, Tim.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and get started. So in May, the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection announced 21 Wisconsin dairy processors would receive a grant in 2023. What is DBA doing to provide dairy farmers, processors, and the industry opportunities to advance?
Well, I think because we're so politically focused here in the state of Wisconsin, we want to make sure that there's dairy policies that are supporting dairy farmers and also dairy processors. The unique thing about DBA is we represent farmers, obviously, but also we have corporate members, and many of our processors are members of DBA as well. So I think we thread that needle really well, being able to support the processors in the farms. Obviously, farmers on regulation is a big part of what we do. But on the processors, we want to make sure we keep them in Wisconsin. Because there's one thing that people really envy the most about Wisconsin is that we have everything here. We have the processors, we have the support systems for the dairy production. So if you don't have processors innovating and being able to have resources to advance their plants, then we're going to see a shrinking market. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really important that dairy farmers understand, and they do. They know that they want to be leading in innovation, not only in the barn, but also at the processing level.
What are some of the roles that dairy farmers and processors play in this process? How can they help one another?
Well, I think first of all, is the relationship between the dairy farmer and the dairy processor is the number one objective of DBA and Edge Dairy Farmer Cooperative both. That was the highest priority. Farmers are telling us they want to have stronger, more transparent relationships with their milk shed. Mm-hmm. And that's very strategic because farmers are really putting a lot of resources forward to produce milk. They want to make sure that when that milk leaves their farm, that they have a viable and well-paying market. So that relationship between the dairy processor and the dairy farmer has probably never been more important than it is now. And as we look to the future and sustainability and consumer demands and consumers' desire to know more about where their milk comes from, the processor and dairy farmer better be talking with one another. Mm-hmm. And having a strong relationship. So I think this is the ways that we kind of put the pieces together, and just understanding that this is a journey that each farmer and each processor take on their own. Right now, within the Edge footprint, which is a sister organization, DBA, we have over 32 processors that our farms ship to. So that's 32, processors that our members, relate to and have business relationship with. So we want to make sure that those relationships are really strong and vibrant and really strategic in nature. It used to be in the old days, and probably when I was younger, a lot of it was very transactional. You maybe had 2 or 3 processors wanting to buy milk from you every day. That's changed now. I mean, we have really tight, we have a long supply, so you don't see a lot of milk trading between, farmers not changing processors frequently, hardly at all. So that relationship with the run processor you're in a business agreement with, you've got to be on the same page. And you both got to win from this. Because again, dairy farmers and processors all have to succeed at the end of the day. If not, we're not going to have the thriving state of dairy in Wisconsin.
Yeah. Is there room for this program to grow, do you think? What are some opportunities for the future?
Well, what I like is that the state is beginning to recognize that they need to fund innovation. They need to give opportunities for dairy processors who have needs to grow their market, to be more innovative. We want to make sure that there's that private-public partnership. The nice thing about this is that, from a taxpayer standpoint, there is hard money going into it from the processor. It's not free money. There's a match involved in that. But again, when you can reward success all day long, that's a great investment. And I think that's where government needs to support industry that's successful. So I think, looking at areas of innovation, how do all these small cheese plants that are popping up, we want to make sure that they have resources to, be able to be unique in their marketplace and find the right farms to align with. So it's good for Wisconsin. We have expansion and processing. I mean, no dairy farmer will argue that one.
Yeah. And you talk about, you just mentioned like having those resources. How can we at DBA assist farmers, processors with those resources?
Well, that's a good question, and we have dairy farmers reaching out to us, on a frequent basis of them looking at getting into the vertical market, actually being their own processor. And we have good examples of that within DBA. I think of Cray Brothers as a good example. I mean, they had this vision of being a processor, and it's been a journey for them, but it's been a very successful journey. So I think there's a lot of entrepreneurial farmers out there looking at, maybe I should be getting in the processing business. So I think it's just being a connector. Again, the one thing that DBA is, we have the corporate members, we have all the suppliers, we have relationships with Wisconsin Cheesemakers, which is another great nonprofit that we work with regularly on policies. So I think the DBA is just a great connector for those farms and the processors both.
How does the dairy processor grant affect the dairy industry in Wisconsin, and what other industries could be affected?
Well, the nice thing about dairy is we touch virtually every business in the state of Wisconsin. When you think about the infrastructure that dairy needs to do what they do every day, it requires a lot of indirect jobs. So whenever you see investment being made by dairy, that's great for Wisconsin economics. I mean, the return on investment is just crazy good. I mean, it's a great investment to make. So I think it's just making sure that we see what the needs are of the industry and being able to lean in where the public sector needs to be involved, where government should be involved, where there's opportunities to invest, again, to see greater rewards. So I think it's up to DBA to always be looking at the landscape, because every day it changes. We saw that coming out of COVID, how the disruption happened, within 30 days we had a disrupted market, but really within about 4 months, things were starting to stabilize already. It's because of DBA leaning in with government to really figure out, where do we really lean into and help our dairy community adjust a market situation. So again, I think DBA is that good barometer. We're always looking at the conditions around us and being very mission driven, that we want to have positive change in everything we do. So I mean, that's what drives us, and that all comes from our members. They're all very mission driven. I mean, they're on a mission to be very successful. So your organization has to emulate that. If not, you won't be relevant.
What actions do farmers and processors need to establish and maintain lasting relationships?
Well, at times I touch on this. I think the relationship between the processor and the farmer needs to be strategic. It needs to be well understood of really a good contractual relationship, but very strategic. That dairy farmer and that dairy processor need to grow together. And this is one thing I hear many, many times is, I'm not sure even where my milk goes. I'm not sure what the kind of products they produce. Well, that's on the farmer for not asking the questions of the processor. What's my products being used for? And asking what markets are we, filling right now. So just so you have a good idea of, what the core competencies of your processor is and what their core market is, I think just that education with one another, knowing where your products go. But also, I think it's just what their vision is as a processor. What's your vision for the future of the market? So I can align, what do I want to do on my production side? Do I want to grow my herd? Do I want to expand? Especially when you're looking at transition to the younger generation. Succession is the second highest priority of our organization, help bringing in the new generation of dairy men and women. So we want to make sure that when they come into the business that they have a good, sound foundation of a relationship with where their products are going to go. Because at the end of the day, it comes down to performance financially. If you can't make money doing it, you're not going to do it. So I think, but also that processor has to be profitable too. So I mean, it's a two-way street. And when we talk to both of them, I think when you put them both in a room and sit down and just have a contractual discussion about, where we need to be, where we're going, that's very helpful. Because that way there's no big surprises. Hopefully there shouldn't be any surprises. But again, it just comes back to communication and transparency.
What is, so regarding the dairy 21 Wisconsin dairy processors receiving this grant. What impact does this have on the farmers themselves specifically?
Well, I think it's what the benefit of this is that their dairy processor is going to be able to find funding to do some things that hopefully is going to help them in the marketplace, either lower their cost of production, find innovative new products, or I know one of them is in cybersecurity, knowing that their plant is secure from cyber attacks. So, I mean, when you think about that, that's all risk to the dairy food chain. So, if you had a problem in the plant and it couldn't take milk for one day, what do you think the dairy farmer is going to do with this milk? So, I think it's just making sure that the needs of the dairy processors are being met, and I think that's very strategic on the government's part to say, you know what, we want to lean into this because we know that if we want to be the model state for dairy production, we have to support them in the ways that's meaningful, not wasteful. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what's great. And again, if there's dollars being invested in there, that's money that's probably not coming out of your paycheck or out of your milk check. So that's a good return on investment.
Yeah, and like you said before, keeping everything in the state.
Keeping everything in the state. The original motto of DBA was keeping the cows in Wisconsin.
Okay.
And at that time, that was 25 years ago when you were seeing the expansion out in California. So the concern was we need to keep the livestock in Wisconsin. That still holds true. Again, we have a lot of pressures outside of this state because there's other states that are easier to do business with. And so I think anything Wisconsin can do to show that they want to have the welcome mat open to dairy, they have to show it by leadership within the capital. And we see that growing interest to do that.